If any of you have a funny story, what's the funniest story that you know about your dad, David, as a leader? I thought that could be a fun way to get us warmed up. And Rob, I know you had a recent example that came up when in one of the conversations we had with some folks. So I might pick on you to start us off and give the others a minute or two quickly. But what's the funniest story that you can remember about your dad as a leader? Rob, would you kick us off?
Yeah, I don't know what the context was when that came up, but that you were talking about. But it was, Dad, it's the story of when you and I'm gonna tell it wrong, but I get to tell it the way I want to tell it. But it was when you showed up and you flew into town and you showed up in the wrong church. And what I remember, and you were supposed to speak, and then I just just picture that walking and like sitting up in front in those just being in front of an entire church, and then everybody trying to make sense out of you sitting there. And I think you said it was like 20 or 30 minutes before you realized you were in the wrong place. And I don't know, that tickles me now, imagining what that would be like as someone in the audience or as you. So that's just one first thing that came to mind. And see, now Daniel's going to want to correct the story. He's going to want to elaborate, make it actually true. But
we'll let him jump in a second. But I love that too, because today it wouldn't be going to the wrong church. You'd be showing up to the wrong Zoom room and then realize you're supposed to be on WebEx or Google Hangouts or platform. Doug, Deborah, or Sue, any funny stories you can think of for your dad as a leader?
I'll go if I can. I think some of the funniest memories that I have is my dad's sense of humor and just love of young people and youth, because when I tell stories about growing up in the Hillford house, I think I was the one that ended up being sort of involved in some of the jokes that happened to us, like the toilet on the chimney. They would tie up students for initiation with no clothes on, in a bag, with scissors hanging out of the top, and they'd come to the porch and they'd ring the doorbell, leave the guy, and then my folks weren't home, and so I had to help out, and but my dad always found like it's such humor in that. The water balloon fights, I mean, we lived on campus, and I know, Dad, you just love that. So such joy. Yeah.
I remember just to back up on that, I remember one night there was a rumor that Dad was going to be kidnapped. And as the rumor went, they were going to kidnap him and take him for a burger. And so sure enough, it happened, but he was waiting for them and just said, okay, we're going for a burger. He was just ready. But I think, I don't know if Doug remembers this, but I've told this story so many times because it says so much about his character. When we were in Spring Arbor, we would go on these trips. He's a road warrior. He loved to go on trips. And one spring break, he decided that he wanted to see what was happening, where all the students were going. So we drove to Fort Lauderdale to see what spring break was like with the students. And we spent the whole week watching the parties. I don't think Doug and I were very old, but that was so fun because I got to see what they're doing.
That's awesome.
Mama was the one who wanted to be right in the middle of it.
Sure.
Back in a beachside hotel that was not the best, but I think we were the only room there that was not either a party room or with the students. And Mom just loved every minute of it.
Yeah. Great to know. Yeah.
I think that experience, Dad, probably was the thing that prompted me to go to Westmont as a freshman.
That's good. And then come home after one quarter.
Well, yeah, but the summer was over after fall quarter.
Right. Good. Doug, I was gonna say, as the oldest, you either have some great funny memories or none at all as the leader.
The only thing I can, I was trying to drum it up and realizing how seriously I take my dad. And I think that's That's an oldest thing, but he may not like this story, guys, so you probably have to take it off. But Mom and Dad decided in 1960 that we were going to drive our brand new Oldsmobile 88, Dynamic 88, all the way from Spring Arbor to Los Angeles, Salt Lake City, and back. And they put a plywood board in the back seat for Deborah and me. And we had no air conditioning. At one point we were 117 degrees in Las Vegas as we were going through the desert. And Sue was just a baby, I believe. But anyway, we were pretty annoying, and we were playing in the back seat. And I remember Dad just getting so fed up with us that it's the only time I ever saw him swing. He was trying to get two kids with one swing. And I think we both ducked, and I think we were quiet after that.
I love it. I love it. So your
Dad,
dad
and as a longtime dad now, I understand totally why he did that.
So with that warm up, Dr. McKenna, the oldest, David, what leader principles did you try to develop in your children? You've got a set of formidable leaders. What principles as a leader did you try to develop in your children over the years or impart to them?
Well, I'm not sure I would see it as I'm sure it wasn't a conscious agenda that some fathers might have. A natural process of relationship, I think, was key. If I had any starting point, of course, it would be the faith in Christ that each of them has. And of course, to me, everything turns on that. And whatever dimensions that we can spin out of that. I do recall them saying, and I don't remember this as a conscious kind of experience or planned kind of experience, but we had the round table where we would have our family dinner, and I'm not sure which one has said that they learned leadership at that table, probably because Dad brought home the problems and talked about them. And gave them the taste of leadership. The other was it seems to me that the environment of the president's home is a leadership setting all of its own, in terms of the people whom you meet, the lessons you hear. You know when your dad is hurting, you know when your dad and mom are dealing with issues, and and then of course I recall in Spring Arbor, for instance, this was not a conscious kind of thing, but we had the sophomore class paint the dining room wall with their names on it in honor of their graduation, and so. The college came home, and I'm sure that kind of experience said, well, Dad may be a president, but he's also very human, and hope has a sense of humor. So episodes like that, more natural than either forced or conscious kind of actions, I think, becomes what I would see probably. When you ask me the question, I simply don't remember, and I think that's good, because I think it must have been flowing through the relationships of the family.
So with that, I know every one of the children take their own things that they remember. For each of you, and any one of you can jump in, what principles did your dad reflect that stuck with you or that stick with you today?
I'll go first again, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
No, I was just sort of teeing off of what my dad said. It's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it like this, but being in HR for most of my career, I think the humanness and sort of what he's speaking about. So as a leader, we got to see you know, his conviction, his struggles, his passion, his, you know, the leadership, what it was like to be a human in a leadership position. And so for me, those kind of conversations that I'm having with leaders was something that came so naturally to me, you know, working with a corporate vice president, or a general manager, or those moments where it's just the two of you and you're asking the tough questions and really helping them through whatever they're going through. And so I think Dad modeled that so well for us, and we got to work it out, you know, as a family. And then that certainly transitioned for me into where I spent my career. So thank you, Dad.
Welcome, dear.
Daniel, I think there are two things that my dad has lived and shown me over the course of all my 68 years. And I think about his fundamental humility, his willingness to be open to all kinds of new information and new ideas, but because his ego just doesn't get in the way. And the second thing that I always have watched in my dad is he is kind. He is humble and he is kind. And if I learned two things from him, if I were able to live up to that standard, those would be the two things that come to mind for me. Here's a little problem, if I can take just a half second. The little problem is I worked mid-career at a company that was neither humble nor kind. And that company has changed quite a bit since the days when I was there. But I was so accustomed to humble, kind leadership that I ran into a buzzsaw when you run into prideful, competitive, ego smashing colleagues, and not very kind sometimes. And I had to learn how to be able to survive and work in that kind of a context and remain true to those values that my dad had taught me and shown me so well.
Thanks for sharing that, Doug.
Yeah, and I think what I saw in him, and I see today, and Daniel, I hear the same things when I go to boards where he has been. I'm just, so many people come up and describe the impact that Dad had on their lives, and I think even the way that he treated us, he treats everyone, and it begins with a true belief in the individual, in the character of the individual. He always sees the good, and that everyone has that God potential in them. And so his encouragement is just of everyone. And I think that he treated, if you look at the four of us, you'll see quite independent people in different areas of industry and interest. And so he treated us individually, which I think doesn't always happen in a family. So that he treated us, he trusted us. I felt trusted to make a lot of my own decisions. Sometimes I wondered, is he going to come down hard on me, or is he going to, do this? But he always seemed to believe in me and trust me to make good decisions. And I see that in the people that he encouraged. He remembers everybody's name, everything they ever did, every position they ever had. He makes that relational connection. And Mom does too. Mom and her friendships run deep and just deep, and they're beautiful friendships. And so I have learned that from him, that see God in everyone and see their potential.
Good. There's so many things. It's like I feel like there's just a shotgun approach to the question because there's so many things I could think of. But one of the things you all are making me reflect on, first of all, is that I think obedience to God is something I don't see talked about that often, that our dad talks about often. And I always picture him, when he talked about, Dad, you mentioned that calling is, you hold your call with a willingness to abide in that call that God has, but with also a willingness to go elsewhere. So you hold it with an open hand. And but there's also like really specific things I think that I apply every day. Like one of the things I always remember watching Dad speak, and he always had this gift for making everyone understand that he knew their context. And so one of the things that I do systematically is learn something about the people with whom I'm speaking before I start speaking, and then they feel like they're home. It's that sense in which I remember you talked about that before. It's been a huge lesson for me. The other thing, Dad, that you always said that sometimes I wrestle with is you always, and I know what you meant, is when you always say, like, be careful how you read your own press clippings. That was probably a quote from somebody else. I don't know, but you said it often. And so I think but I think what I'm realizing, it's both the good and the bad, is being thoughtful about how you read how people talk about you. When you do get, any kind of public exposure. And then the last thing is funny because I immediately thought of Mom. And this is, I hope, Doug, to your point, like, this is a story I don't know if, but one of the things that Mom would say to me that people are horrified if they don't understand the whole context. Mom would say to me, and I maybe I've made it up in my mind, but that she would actually describe it this way, that if you and Dad are both falling off a cliff and I have each of your hand and one of you's got to go, you're going. And I think she said that, right? It was like, I think she literally described it that way. And when I tell people that, they're horrified. They're like, come on, like, you're just telling it for effect. No, my mom would tell us that story. And I think there is a profound leadership lesson for me that is even when it's harder, is attempting to put my marriage before my children. And that's easier said than done sometimes, but I think it's interesting that how, doing some research on, I don't know, it's just been interesting, like that whole thing when I thought about some of the things that Mom passed on to us, because I think about the combination of both of Mom and Dad in each of us. So those are the first things that came to mind.
So with that, there's one more question I'd love to ask. And it's this: if you could use one word to describe both your mom and your dad separately, what word would you use?
Each.
Yeah, each of them.
One word.
Mom, one word for Dad.
Ooh.
Ooh.
One word.
Wow.
I see Doug is searching the dictionary.
Yeah, the dictionary in my head. There's so many things that come to mind. I think of my dad as an adventurer.
That's great. And how about Mom?
And Mom's fierce.
That's so funny.
I love it.
Yeah. I was thinking of Dad, curiosity, so a little bit of adventuresome. So I see that, and then I had fierce too, fierce and stubborn for my mom.
True.
Yeah, and I would say for Mom, loyal.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very loyal to the depth of her soul.
Yes, Deborah. Yes. Oh, that's where we get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And Dad's, and it's two words, but it would be unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. Yeah, it's interesting. I thought of grace and grit, but it's interesting when I thought about, so funny you described Mom as fierce and Doug, and I think of grace with Dad as being the two sides, like in Amazing Grace, where it says, "'Twas fear that taught my heart to fear, and fierce and grace my fear relieved." It's like, so both sides of grace. The Dad would call people out, but at the same time love them is just a weird thing, but an awesome thing. And then grit for Mom, because when you said, I was just thinking, Daniel, our mother she's kind of a beast.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, she just, there's a side of her that just will get it done, and
Don't mess with Jan.
She has
Don't mess with it, especially if she's holding your hand over a cliff.
she has
Now
two
you-
she has two daughters that are beautiful images of exactly those things.
Right.
No prisoners, right?
No prisoners. Not with my
Now you know why I don't fight with your mom. I did once and lost. And never again.
My husband would say the same.
That's awesome.
Good.
She is a
That's good.
Yeah, if dad is the sword, she's the shield, I'll tell you.
she's a protector. She is, yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
That's cool.
that's really true.
Thanks all for sharing. It's really powerful to hear the generational impact that you've had, David, and the impact in each of your lives and what you've taken from it and some of those shared pieces as well. So thanks for jumping on this. This is powerful to be a part of and an honor to be able to be on this call with you today.
And if the youngest can have a voice too, before even the oldest guy on the call speaks, I meant what I said last week when we were all together. We quite literally run in all of your wake. It is unbelievable. And I never, it's never bothered me an ounce that every one of your name comes up in the business world, these verticals that we deal with, but every one of your names comes up. I could tell you story after story as I was looking at all your faces right now across these contexts. It's just been, and I know Daniel, and I know it's true because Daniel said it is true. Like, in the spaces we run in churches, in corporations, and in university and seminary contexts, it's unbelievable. So it's pretty cool as a youngest to be able to walk in that.
May
I
I
just have
have
to say one thing, Rob. Oh, maybe I'm muted. Just have to say one thing on top of that, Rob. When I started on Asbury Seminary board, I was on a committee and they put me in a room with the committee, and my chair was right under Dad's portrait. So everybody else was looking at me and Dad.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
So
That is the way it
there's
is.
a literal wake.
It's a
Daniel,
good
may I
thing
have a
Mom's
final
picture
word
wasn't
here?
there. They'd all been scared to death. No,
Absolutely, David. Jump in.
Yes, because this is talking about leadership in general or in specific as well. Let me conclude with the leadership lesson I'm learning today, and it illustrates a very important point that if we are not learning in leadership as we go, we're obviously falling behind, and there are a myriad of traps into which we fall when we stop learning. And the lesson that came to me was a follow-up when Doug, I believe, mentioned humility, and I then went into my my leadership lesson and realized that a leader, when retired, will obviously look back upon career and make all kinds of judgments, but also that's going to be filled with regrets and some hurts and some instances when you feel neglected. And the particular temptation is to go back into the president's reports or whatever is coming out in information from the places where I've served, and humility goes away in a hurry when you start saying, well, do I find my name anyplace? I mean, have they been smart enough to know that I was the one that did that or started it? Or can I see the inference there of my career? So that's the opposite of humility in terms of constantly looking for credit. And it's that credit rising out of ego that I think not only makes us miserable personally, but I think it is a failure of faith in believing that God called you to that moment of time in his, what I call the grand drama of redemption. And I have realized that that I'm only a part-time player in that great drama. I had my entrance from the wings, went to center stage, read my lines, and now I exit into the wings, but not to be forgotten, but rather to, it's just a beautiful change of outlook to not look back and wonder whether I'm still remembered and whether I'm getting credit, but to see yourself in as a role player, having had your moment on center stage, and then being able to see the larger drama unfolding for good, in which you, well, I have a part in this, and therefore God is leading on through new people and such. And it's a beautiful experience to see it, to see leadership not as center stage, except in the context of the grand drama. And when you see yourself in that kind of setting, I think the whole dimension changed, and it changes from jealousy or the desire for credit to a sense of gratitude and really saying, wow, what an experience that I was a part-time player in God's redemptive drama. And that's my retirement view of leadership. And I can't tell you how much how good I feel in terms of at Asbury and Spring Arbor and Seattle Pacific, to just see myself in the drama, but not having to be still somehow being a spot on center stage.
That's great.
Amen.
Thank
Amen.
you.
Man. Yeah.
That's a great place to wrap.